Here we go.
I think we are live streaming. If we are, welcome everybody. I'm not seeing the screen that we should be seeing at this moment in time, but we'll go with it. I'm being told that we're live. So welcome to this Music Monday, My Life the Musical. This is a Facebook Live session where I have the great pleasure of being joined once again by music therapist and consultant Grace Meadows. Thank you for joining us, Grace, yet again.
Not at all. Real pleasure.
This is the third in a series of 5, and sadly I wasn't here for last week's, but I've caught up on last week's as well, and it was an amazing discussion you had with Dr. Jemima Fitzgerald. So thank you for that. And if any viewers haven't seen weeks 1 or 2, they are available on our channels, so please do take a look at those sessions. Grace is kind of doing these 5 sessions around the use of music for a person with dementia and also family carers. And tonight's, as I say, is called My Life the Musical. So Grace, I wondered if you could just give yourself a little bit more of a background and introduction than I've managed to do, and a brief overview of what we're going to cover this evening.
Sure, and thank you so much again, Sue, for the invitation to join you. And the last 2 sessions have been great, and it's lovely that we've got these 5 to really dive into the power of music. So I am a musician by training, a bassoonist, and after training as a bassoonist, I went on to train as a music therapist and have worked in a range of areas with the power of music, and more recently have been leading the Music for Dementia campaign and doing various other bits and pieces, including now working with Dementia Carers Count, which I'm really excited about, because actually carers are central to people living with dementia being able to live well. So it's really lovely to be able to be with you and talk about how music not only helps the person that you might be caring for, but can help you. And many of you who are joining us this evening might love music, may have never picked up an instrument, or have always sung or had a connection with music through your life. But I certainly know that my life has been defined by music. At times it has been my life. It's not been there at times, but there's a story with music and me, and I think that we all have a story with music. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is it being a part of our lives, and why it's so important, and how it becomes so much part of our lives, but also how then do we use music to capture somebody's life? How do we capture somebody's life in music, and the different techniques and ways we can do that? And how do we make sure that we spread the word about that in terms of someone's life, and the people involved in providing care for somebody living with dementia beyond one single carer? And then we'll just think about wrapping up and some final thoughts about how our relationship with music can change and does change, and what we need to take into consideration with that. So I hope we've got time to get through all of that.
Well, let's try, shall we? Okay, thanks, Grace. So if anyone has any comments or suggestions for other people that they'd like to put in the chat, then please do so. We really do want people to share their thoughts and feelings. And a little bit later, Grace and I will explain one of the calls to action we want, really, which is to hear of your songs so that we can put a mix together. If you do have any comments or even the questions, please put them in the chat. We know some people don't like to they want to remain anonymous, so you can private message us as well, and we'll try to get to everyone's comments if we can. If there are questions we don't get to during this session, then we will come back to you if there's a query that you need answering. So you were talking there, Grace, about music is such part of our identity. And before we get into that, I just want to flag as well that one of the things carers often say to us is they don't know who they are anymore. They've lost their identity. So I think where you've said that we can capture someone's life in music and pass that on to other carers, actually for a carer to capture their own identity as well, we'll talk about that through this session as well, won't we?
Absolutely, yeah.
And then the other thing you said is that music has been a massive part of your life. And I have to say, music has never been a massive part of my life. I'm probably somebody who's not, I don't immediately go to turn on the radio or turn on some music station that I want to listen to. But it doesn't mean that I haven't got a musical to my life at all. There are still, and we've talked about it, I think you've extracted from me how much music is part of who I am, even though I don't think it. And perhaps we'll get onto that in a little bit. But it is really important to us, and music and songs stay with us, don't they, throughout our lives?
It really does. And it's all about the way in which we lay down memories. And it's a bit like when you'll often hear people talk about when the first memories are formed, and that's often when language first is acquired. And that's because you can attach something to a feeling or an experience. And it's a little bit the same with music. So I often think about the first school disco or the first big emotional moment in your life. So for some people that, I don't know, it could be a religious moment, for example. There's often a big moment in someone's life early in the first couple of decades that's got a faith-based association, or it could be that school disco, that first school disco that you went to and you can remember every song that got played. It could be the first time the first time you moved away from home. It could be the first time you met somebody that you fell head over heels for. Often when we have these big series of firsts, there's a musical cultural moment going on at the same time, both externally out there in terms of what's happening in the wider cultural world, but for you and your connection to it. And so when you have that, whether it's a first kiss moment, if you like, that music stays with you because it's that experience was so emotionally powerful. And so that music will always stay with you because of the way we embed memories. And we don't just embed them neurologically, we embed them on an emotional level as well and in our bodies. So that first time you went to school disco and you were allowed out, and you could get up to whatever mischief you might have liked to, but there'll have been a physiological response. We talked a bit about the way in which we process music in the first session, but there'll been a physiological response to that which will be held in your body somewhere. And if you then combine that with the memories and you then rehearse that time and time again, the more you retell that story, the more that memory becomes embedded. So that's why often these memories tend to stick a bit more than other memories, because you've rehearsed them, they've become really embedded, and you've probably let's go with this like the first school disco memory, but you probably then found yourself dancing in the kitchen when that song or those songs have come on from that time. So it's really staying with you, and you're keeping hold of it, you're sort of refreshing that memory all the time. But that's not to say, and we've always talked over the last couple of weeks about the balance here. So there might also be songs or pieces of music that are associated with firsts or memories that aren't necessarily positive. So it might be the first time that you lost a relative, for example, and you had your first funereal experience, or moving away from home might not have been all that positive. So it's holding in mind that some of those songs or pieces of music might have varying triggering responses, I think. But what we do know that underpins all of this, and is the sort of central kind of theme around the power of music, is where it has that really powerful impact and the benefits can be felt the most is when it's got that personal connection. So there might have been, if we I don't know, go back to when you were 18, Sue, and you were out in the world, doing your Sue thing, there might have been a particular style or genre of music that you enjoyed more than any other, and that would be the style or genre you'd want to go back to, as opposed to, I don't know, maybe you weren't so keen on a particular style, say jazz or something, but you really loved punk. So jazz wouldn't hold the same memories for you as punk might do. So it's really about what was important to that person at that time, and I think often the music that meant something to somebody can be a really good shortcut to adapting or changing a mood or a moment. So if you know that somebody would really welcome a pick-me-up, or then or a piece to calm them down, being able to go to somebody's playlist, or their selection of favorite songs, then you can just do that without having to have that pre-conversation about what music they like.
Yeah, and I know you and Jemima talked last week, didn't you, when your music of My Tears, about how you select different types of music for different moods, and to create the mood, or to help with the mood that you're wishing to occur. And I think the other thing for me, as you're talking, you know, again, as I said, I didn't have a great musical history, but the more I listen to you, the more I think, oh, actually, maybe I did. Because that you're right, there are all those firsts, and that when Sue was doing what Sue was doing at 18, but actually there's also a connection, and I've noticed more in recent years that if it was a genre of music I wasn't particularly into, but a really close friend of mine was, actually I really like listening to that now, because it reminds me of Jo and Jo doing her thing, or Paul and Paul doing his thing. So, you know, it does actually link you back to relationships that you've had as well. And particularly also that brings us on to the relationships you might be having with your current, you know, the person who's looking after you now.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you, I can think of various people that I hold dear, and I can think of a song that I associate with them. And that's actually a really helpful thing when we're thinking about how we're capturing somebody's life in music. We don't just have to do it in terms of them. It's like, what's their wider world? How can we build out from who they are? Are there other people that we know that a memory of them through experiencing a song or a piece of music again would conjure up comfort and reassurance, or, you know, a jolly moment or something, or spark a, you know, funny story about mischief that they used to get up to together, or whatever it might have been.
And that's where it links to Dr. Raja's Facebook Live today about reminiscence. Music is a real powerful way of talking about sort of events from the past, isn't it? And reminiscing, and what did you get up to, and, you know, where were you when you heard this piece of music? But I'd just like to reiterate as well, Grace, what you have said is that we have to be mindful that not all music conjures up happy feelings, and it can conjure up sad feelings. That we can all have sad feelings, and sometimes we want to address that, but also we have to be mindful that does music trigger some trauma or emotional event? And again, Dr. Raja talked quite eloquently about that in the earlier session, about how these things that we use for reminiscence may link back to something that was quite traumatic for someone in their childhood or teenage years. So it is about selecting the music and being personalized, isn't it?
Yeah, always. I think that if that nothing else that we talk about over these 5 weeks that people take away, it's all about you and your relationship to music and what matters to you, and that personalization, that's just so key to it.
So when we met the first week, we touched on 2 stories, didn't we, of how music can be used for a person with dementia to support that person to acknowledge their own identity, to have a sense of well-being. I think the couple of different case studies we talked about, it was about really sort of providing some motivation and some communication strategies to somebody who was otherwise sort of very isolated in the situation they were in. But one of the things we said at the start is also music can be great for a carer to identify with their history and who they are at heart. And I know you've got a lovely story about you, haven't you?
So it makes me blush a bit, but it's very much rooted into teenage years, because again, it was a bit of a first. So I'm sure my husband won't mind me sharing this, but I had a crush as a teenager on our vicar's son. And I can feel myself going Beetroot. And anyway, my mum used to tease me something chronic about this. So she used to sing Son of a Preacher Man at me. You know, she would creep up at me in the house. And actually I'm still very good friends with him now. It was at the time, it was excruciating, but I can look back at it with real love and affection now, especially because my mum's not around. But it's this way of me feeling connected to her. So although I thought she was being really mean in the moment, I now look back and feel those moments of real fondness and love, and that actually, if it'd been me, I'd have done exactly the same thing. And had that wicked sense of humor. But it was a lovely bonding moment. And I think it's that other thing, isn't it, that we often don't want to talk about, but when someone's no longer here, how the music can help you feel connected to that person still. So for me, there was definitely a period when it felt a bit sensitive to listen to that song. But now, actually, if you put it on, I start smiling and dancing a bit and saying, oh, God, Mum, you'd never know what you told me last week. And nattering about, how the fact we're still in touch. So yeah, but you've got one as well, haven't you, Sue?
I have, and we'll come to mine in a moment. But I just want to say to viewers, you were saying about was your mum being mean in the moment? I wasn't being mean in the moment to Grace at that point.
No, not at all. No,
you had given me permission to bring it up. If anyone's thinking out because she was blushing and it was awful of me to have said it, I did have permission.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, and I do. And again, one of these things, not someone who's actively seeks out music. And I as everyone has been through tricky times in life, times where you need something to really sort of give you a boost to your resilience and give you a boost to your ability to just give something a go. And mine is that I don't know that you may know the proper name for it, but the Ski Sunday tune. Do you remember the Ski Sunday tune with the drums and everything? That's the one. I'll let you sing it, not me. And I've never skied. I did. I skied once and it terrified me. But it was the tune that was on Ski Sunday when I was a child, and my father would always sit down and watch Ski Sunday, and it was just all about being empowered and being able to give something a go. And you might crash, you might burn, but you've given it your best and you've done everything you can. And that's my go-to piece of music. I can't say it's because I ski or anything. It's a really random connection. And that's the other side. Some people's connections you may not necessarily be able to predict, can you? So just give any music a try and see what reaction you get.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, because what you're talking about there is the real deep emotional resonance of that music. So you felt really empowered and inspired by that, and that's really stayed with you. And actually, if we're talking here very much about carers and the impact of caring for someone, then this is what music's there to do. It's there to help inspire you, pick you up, give you that sense of empowerment and courage and encouragement to keep going.
Yeah, and it only needs to be a snippet as well. When we go back to my story of it, it's literally the snippet of it that I have on my phone, and I just need to play that 20-second piece, and it can just have such an impact on me. So it's not that you have to find the time to go and find half an hour, is it, where you can put headphones on and listen to music? Because I know for many carers that's just not possible, is it?
No, it might be half a song or 20 seconds, as you say, but it's just that little dip into it that can really just make you go, okay, we can keep going, it's okay.
So hopefully people are beginning to think about some of the music that might be important to themselves or for the person with dementia. So how might a carer capture the life of a person they care for in music once you've decided on that soundtrack?
So I think it really depends on where the person's at, and obviously that's key to this, but there's so many different ways. There are lots of playlist solutions out there, so I'm sure lots of people listening this evening will have heard of Playlist for Life. That's a really great way of doing it. And of course there's Desert Island Discs, that classic format that lots of us have grown up listening to and love. And what I think so special about that is that it's not just a list of music, there's a story to be told around each song or piece of music. And I think being able to capture some of the narrative, some of the story around it is something really special to go back to and connect as a really lovely legacy piece for families later on, when somebody might come to that music and think, well, I don't know why they love that piece of music, but if you've captured why, then that person can form a bit more of an emotional attachment to the song. But then it also for me, I think you can have a multi-sensory experience as well. So it might be about items that accompany the music. So, if they were a skier and they loved that song, are there goggles? Is there a scarf, or are there gloves, or is there an image, or, is there a newspaper clipping of Eddie the Eagle doing amazing things? Is there something you can put in with each song that accompanies not only that person's story, but gives that tactile or visual stimulation to recall memories, and makes it can for some people it can be the route into why that song means something to them. But again, I think it's very much about where is that person at and what's manageable for them. Are tactile things still important to them, or is that just a bit overwhelming? So you can have that sort of musical memory box idea, but again, that's sort of a discretionary use really in terms of where somebody's at. I mean, it could be that there's a particular sound in a piece of music that somebody's really stimulated by, and it might be finding a little handheld percussion instrument that mimics that sound that you put in the box that they play along with when they're listening to it. So I think there's something about allowing your imagination to run free a little bit about associations, and whether you're doing a kind of autobiographical life in music, or whether it's, you know, a family's life in music, or whether it's a life with my friends in music. There's so many different ways you can cut it. You know, if you're a gardener, for example, and you love nature, then actually you might be including the sounds of birds, or the river at the end of the road, or whatever it might be. So I think there's so many different ways of capturing that.
And lots of different animal sounds for different people. It would be different, wouldn't it, according to their life story and their background. And I think it's beautiful how you kind of linked it to the memory boxes, which are much more physical and much more tactile, and that you can have the two alongside each other and they can complement each other. Any viewers, we talked about that with Dr. Raja earlier today, the memory boxes, and also on our website there is information about creating your own comfort box, which I talk about in there, creating a comfort box for yourself or the person with dementia, and they can sit alongside the music really well. So got some lovely ideas around sort of how to go about it, some of the do's and don'ts. And then there are also some items you can, to allow a person with dementia to easily access the music, don't we? We know that there are much easier where you put the USB stick in with the playlist on, and then just one switch the button, the person can turn it on and off. We do have a live online session on the benefits of music, and we go into some of those apps that are available to you to download music to, and also some of the radios or easy play. I'm struggling to find my word. I think it's because it's 7:30 at night. But some of those tools that you can use to play music to empower a person with dementia, and we will be doing that session on the 30th of June. So if you're interested in that session, go to our website and you can book onto it. The other thing I think you touched on there was, once you've got a memory box of music or any type of memory box, it gives a legacy for younger generations of the family to connect with the person with dementia, but also any paid carers or any other individuals that are going to be supporting the person.
Yeah, absolutely. It can feel very dry to hand a paid carer or another healthcare professional a list and say, here are Bob's favourite songs. That's it's very useful, don't get me wrong, but what's really nice is if there's a bit of context or history that goes along with those songs. So, you know, this is Bob's favourite song because this is the song he walked down the aisle to, or, you know, this is Bob's favourite song because, you know, when he played rugby, this was the song that was always sung in the changing room afterwards, or whatever it might be. But that it then gives a sense of to that person who may only be having contact for a short period of time about how best to use that music. So, you know, you don't want them putting on a pick-me-up song when actually they need a calm-me-down song. So some of that context and history can make sure that the right musical choices are being made.
Yeah, really useful piece of advice. And as you say, it means that you can tailor the music to the situation that you're wanting, and the ambience of the situation that you're wanting to create. So we've sort of talked about using the music for different situations. Healthcare professionals, I know, really value it, particularly in care homes, don't they, to be able to support the person. But music and the personalization of music can change over time, can't it? And it can, that change can impact on somebody who has dementia and the use of that music.
Absolutely. I think we touched on this in the first session, that obviously our relationship with music is an ever dynamic thing, and the relationship with dementia is ever changing. And for some people, you know, their hearing might decline, or their ability or capacity to actually process sound might decline. It might become actually too sensorially challenging for them. So there's something about being mindful of that as somebody's dementia continues. So I would always say, keep looking out for those signs where they're not perhaps as comfortable as they might have been last week, and just keep an eye on that, and then, or an ear on it rather. But actually then if you find that it might have just been a one-off moment, it wasn't working, but it, that there's lots that you can pick up on, especially if you're revisiting the same music or similar music, that that can actually be helpful to help give you a sense of where somebody's at with their levels of engagement, responsiveness. And I just would quickly add that I had an exchange with a lady earlier this year who was caring for her husband, whose brother had written a song for him, and he couldn't stop listening to this song. He had it on full-blown repeat, and his wife, his primary carer, wrote to me and said, look, what do I do? The music's driving me mad. So we talked about why that music might have been important to him, but also ways in which she might have helped expand that repertoire out a little bit, and the way that she might have just done that through movement, or whether that was talking to the person who'd composed the piece for her husband, and maybe there was another piece to be composed for him. But I think what I'm trying to get to is that it can, if you've got a short playlist of music, it can feel repetitive. So don't be afraid to experiment and add other things into the mix. We consume so much music in our lives today, more than ever. But if somebody was a Beatles fan, they may not love the whole Beatles back catalogue, but they might like more than 2 or 3 of the Beatles songs. And there may be other bands around at the same time whose music they also like. So don't feel you just have to listen to the Beatles if that's their thing.
Mm-hmm. Really useful piece of advice. And I'd just like to unpick a few things, because there are a few things in there, aren't there? There are that somebody's hearing might change. They may not be able to cope with the sounds and the frequencies that they used to be able to. So you might have to play around with the frequencies that are playing. But within that, an important point I think you mentioned was that keep an eye on it, keep an eye and an ear out for the reactions of the person. Is it changing? Is it beginning to cause a little bit more discomfort than it did before? But don't just go on one time, because people have good days, they have bad days. They have days where they'll connect with something, they'll have a day where they don't connect with something. And there'll be days that they can cognitively shine and days that they can't cognitively connect with it quite so well. So it is watching for little changes, but sort of just watching over time and thinking, is this just a good day or a bad day? But giving it a second go sometimes. I think that was one element you talked about.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then I do think it's so important, the point that you picked up, that it can be very repetitive for a carer if it's the same piece of music, a bit of a Groundhog Day, isn't it? That it's on repeat. And for a carer, it might have been a piece of music that was really important to them once, and it's kind of destroyed it as well. So your tips on that are really useful. I think another one you mentioned to me is, well, put some headphones on and listen to some other music as well. I think that was another option you mentioned once before.
Yeah, I think so. We talked once about how your music might not overlap, and that the person you're caring for might really like a particular type of music and you might like another type of music. There's nothing wrong with having your own little silent disco, whether that's sitting in chairs and listening to music together and holding hands maybe, or even getting up on your feet and having a bit of a dance around. So I think the kind of big message is you can be creative. There's no real right or wrong. It's about what works best for you and the person that you're caring for.
Thanks, Grace. And I think that's a place to wrap this up. We're at 7:30. It brings us to the end of our session. Thank you so much for joining us again, Grace. I know we've got a few more sessions with you. Don't forget, please, our call to action to everyone really is to tell us a song so we can include it in the playlist that we're going to develop at the end of this 5 sessions. We'll be releasing that in recognition of Thank You Day, which this year is to thank carers of people with a particular focus as well on dementia. So do join us next week for the penultimate Music Monday with Grace. And next week it's called Band Camp. We'll be talking about collective music making and community, which can make us feel how that can make us feel and how it can connect with our brains and our reminiscence and everything like that. So please do join us for the Bandcamp next week, which is at the same time, 7 o'clock. Thank you, Grace. Are there any final words from you before we finish?
Just that it's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I think that we were going to talk quickly about the carer survey.
We were. Thank you for that prompt, Grace. Yes, we've launched our carer survey, which gives us the opportunity to find out what causes issues for people at the moment, and allows us to start planning for the future for the next 12 months and further on from there. We really need to hear from you. We had a great response to our carer survey last year, and we'd love if we could get a similar type of response this year. It does really help us on planning for our services that we deliver, but also for what we campaign for at a policy level. So really important to us. It takes about 15 minutes to complete, and you can write as much or as little as you want in it. Some of the questions are just you tick a box, but if you want to give us more information, you can. So we'll put a link in the chat to our carer survey, and if you can fill it in, it would be incredibly important to us. So we'll see you next week, Grace, and do people put any comments and link to the carer survey as well. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Sue. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.